Bob Bongo Starkie, good to have you here at Noise 11. May I quote the wise words of Keith Richards? It's good to be here. It's good to be anywhere.
I second that.
You're looking good. I mean, you're looking really good, considering what you've been through. Absolute hell over the last 12 or so months. So thank you for joining us here. And, you know, I'm so excited that we're talking about the future, not the past.
As the Queen would say, anus horribilis. It was a fucking terrible year, I tell you. But, yeah, anyhow, we're still here. We're above ground. And my mother always said, Bobby, count your blessings. So that's all I do these days.
I do miss our Sunday afternoons in South Melbourne together.
Oh, so do I. Yeah, that was a great gig.
Yeah, that lasted years.
Yeah, it was a Purple Gang, and then they sort of changed things around, and it changed owners, and it became, we couldn't just play in the corner of a pub, you know. So anyhow, that came to an end, and rather sadly, I miss that. Just playing that once a month and playing, you know, all that sort of Chuck Berry stuff and what have you. I really love that band. It's really good. And playing with Steve Williams on sax and harp, and playing with James Black on the piano, and Gary Young, of course, on the drums. That's pinch me moments, you know. Yep. I really miss that.
Yeah, it's quite the special time for us to all be in the same room together. You have something very special coming up. 4 shows only at this point, no doubt more to come, but a complete performance of the Ego Is Not a Dirty Word album, the second album from Skyhooks, which I have down here. Unfortunately, my copy is not worth anything because, as you can see, someone scribbled on mine, so it's worthless now.
The autograph you want on that is actually Shirl's, and that'd be worth something.
Can you do a forgery, Bob?
Yeah, I digress, yeah.
Has the Ego Is Not a Dirty Word album ever been performed in its entirety before?
No, it hasn't. But I guess it would have only been in the early days that we played all those tracks. But probably mainly with Steve Hill, I would imagine. But no, this is the first. And Mark Burchett, promoter, approached me about that. He'd been listening to the album, and he just thought, oh, well, it was something he wanted to do, wanted to promote. So that's what we're doing. And we're all looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, because we're around the 50th anniversary of that. We had the Living in the 70s 50th anniversary recently. And what amazed me, I mean, when this was recorded at TCS Studios in Richmond between January and May 1975, this was just 6 months after the release of the Living in the 70s album. When you look at the timeline, you went in to record Living in the 70s to that album being released, recording Ego Is Not a Dirty Word to that album being released, and it was all done in 11 months.
We were busy, that's for sure. We were playing the whole time then, like doing live gigs. So, yeah, it's all a bit of a blur to me, but look, it was a lot of fun. Everything was fun back then.
And TCS Studios. TCS Studios was the Channel 9 studios, I believe.
Yeah, it's where they recorded, like Young Talent Time and stuff like that. It was, it was I think it was only, I think it was done on 16 tracks, that recording machine. Could be wrong, but I think that's what it was. It's certainly the mixing desk. I mean, most of the time it was in bits. It's you come into the studio and John French would have the thing sort of pulled apart trying to fix something. But look, it was that sound, I guess, the analog sound, and that was really the Skyhook sound. Years later, we went in to do some recording. It was in some studio in Richmond, and it was just when digital recording had started. And so we played a few tunes and recorded them digitally, and then we played a few tunes and recorded them on tape. And it was just lay down Mazare says, yeah, that's the sound, you know. And so that's how we flew the Skyhooks. We were very much an analog band.
The first album, Living in the 70s, was produced by Ross Wilson, who also produced the second one, but not as Ross Wilson. Why was he called Duke Wilson?
You ask him. I mean, really, I've got no idea. Well, you know, I'm the Duke or I'm the boss, you know, like he had these sort of things. But that would have been him. That would have been in moniker. He would have put that in. But well, you know, he was really good for us. You know, like as a producer, he was very ambitious, and he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, the album was released in 1975. The population of Australia in 1975 had not yet reached 14 million, yet this album sold 200,000. 200,000 today would make you the number one album of the year in a population of 27, 28 million.
Yeah, but it actually sold more than that. But no, it was. Look, it was kind of huge in terms of back then. I think no one had ever sold more than 70,000 records or something. I think that might have been Daddy Cool. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was kind of extraordinary back then. It was a pretty heady sort of thing happening. You know, it was. I think Living in the 70s started selling, and then we put out Ego, and Living in the 70s was still selling, you know, and so it was sort of always one followed the other. But both really good albums, you know. It was, there were sort of the heady days of Skyhooks.
For the fans who may have missed it, there was a 40th anniversary that put the first two albums all in one package, plus an extra live album at the end.
I think that's the best recording issue of Skyhooks. That's fantastic. That particular package, and it's got the demos for both those albums attached as well, which is really good, and the live stuff was really good as well. No, fantastic.
One of the demos that you talk about is Sweet Sister for the Ego album. What was Sweet Sister that never made the album?
Oh, you know, I didn't have any say in any of that stuff, but it was the only, what I remember, it was like, oh, Sweet Sister, and it was like, dance like she got eggs in her pocket, a picture of a daddy in her locket, you know, I mean, stuff like that. So maybe it wasn't lyrically that strong and interesting that they sort of left that one out. I don't know.
But I tell you what, Bob, for history's sake, Sweet Sister might be one to put into your set list when you're doing this 50th anniversary show.
We've got so many songs. That's the problem, Paul. I think that might be stretching it. I'll have a listen. But
even a 30-second segment.
I don't know. You know, I don't recollect that song to be one of our great tracks. But but it would do the rest. I mean, even Private Eye. That's a bit of a throwaway.
Yeah.
But you know, when you string all those tracks together, they're kind of amazing because there's no two the same. It's just this incredible, you know, like Greg McCange's amazing songwriting, you know. That's what it's all about, and that's why I'm doing the show, really. I mean, as it turns out, those songs just, you know, they just kind of live on and on and on, you know, and it's just a real joy. But yeah, no, like, it's going to be fun, like playing, you know, Love on the Radio. That's haven't ever played that one for years and years and years, of course, like 50 years.
Well, let's actually talk about a few of the songs there. So Love on the Radio, you've just mentioned that one there. That was co-written with Steve Hill. So I'm assuming that's a very early Skyhooks, even before Living in the 70s.
A large proportion of the songs, you know, both on Living in the 70s and Ego, were there. They were in the set, you know, before those albums were recorded. I'm not real good at all that stuff. Let's have a look. So we've got Love on the Radio. That was definitely an early one. Saturday Night, that was an early one.
Yeah.
Love's Not Good Enough, I think that came later. The Other Side was pretty early. Smart Ass Songwriters, that was an early one. Mercedes Ladies, I'm not sure. I think that came late. I think that might have been worked out in the Ego sessions. And amazing when we signed that terrible recording contract in America, they released Mercedes Ladies as, our first single. Just absolutely nuts.
Wow.
But
I was unaware of that. They also changed the track listing, didn't they? Like the first American album. So was that sort of a compilation of the first two Australian albums? Because Horror Movie was on the Ego album in America.
Yeah, correct. And also they released it in England too. It's a combination album. Every shows, Private Eye. Ding 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 ding. I'm looking forward to playing that. It was always fun playing that in the old days.
Yep.
Yeah. I haven't listened to Sweet Sister, so I'll give that a listen, Paul. And,
look, don't take my word as recommendation. What about Every Chaser Steeple? That was a Red Simon song, but Red didn't. He had the occasional song on the occasional album, but he didn't seem to write that much. Did he present a lot of songs?
No, he didn't present a lot of songs, but there was generally like one a record. I think he only wrote 4 songs. And, of course, Greg wrote like hundreds of them. But so you could not call Red prolific. But his songs were fantastic. They were just very red. I mean, smut. He brought smut with him to, like when he joined the Skyhooks. He was playing that in his original band, that band called Scumbag, very aptly, and so he brought that, and I assume he wrote it. I'm not sure if the band wrote it or not, but and that's a beauty. I mean, that really contributed to the whole Skyhooks vibe. It just went down a storm, that one. Everyone loved that. And then, so the next one was Every Chaser Steeple, which is sort of like, which is a fantastic Red tune. We do that in our set anyway. It's a bit of a favourite of mine because it's a great guitar song, all these intertwining riffs and going into 3-4 time. Very clever. And a bit of a challenge to play if you're a guitarist. And but of course, Every Chaser Steeple is a little bit of a downer of a song if you listen to the lyrics. But it's clever, but it's also a little bit about what was happening, And it's sort of like, how tough life can be. And then, I guess one of the verses is about, being a pop star, and the negative aspect of that in some way. But look, I love Red songs. I love playing them. And of course, there was Mumbo Jumbo. I think that was
Straight to Go World.
Yeah, and so we did that one in America. Again, interesting tune.
Ego is Not a Dirty Word was Greg's song.
Oh yeah, I mean that was just a brilliant song, really. It just absolutely 5-star Greg McCain tune,
Greg had the knack to cut through the mood of the moment, didn't he? Ego is not a dirty word. It was just a statement unto itself. But, when you look at what was happening in the news at the time, and you had Nixon and, that was news all over the world, the ability to take Nixon and Jesus and put them into the same song was quite genius.
Very clever. I mean, it's just like he could write about anything, Greg. I mean, that's the thing. It's like everything was sort of like it came out of his head, and with the sort of he cast. He's a very cynical guy, McCain. So he sort of casts that very cynical eye, across the environment and the populace. But clever too, just really, really good. And you know, as I've probably said before, there's no two songs the same. It's not like, you know, we weren't like AC/DC where every song was basically the same sort of format, and just sort of they really stuck to their guns and their sound and what have you. Whereas we were, you know, like we tended to be a little bit sort of smart ass, you know, and as a song, you know, smart ass songwriter, denotes. But yeah, look, I just, for whatever reason, you know, like I just love playing these Skyhooks songs. It's a real challenge for me as a guitarist, and also, you know, I just sort of just think, oh, they should sort of live on, and they're difficult. You know, like it's very rare that you would see a band playing a Skyhooks tune because, you know, the way Red and I operated with the intertwining riffs and what have you, that's no one else really sort of did that. And of course, Red was very clever, you know, in his playing. He was sort of minimalistic, but he just had this ability to, you know, like to cleverly sort of wind through the chording or whatever in some sort of way, and just really add you know, a real sort of touch to the songs. And I was sort of like, I was more into the sounds and the rhythmic side of things, and just being a bit more instinctive, whereas, you know, Red was sort of just very clever.
Yeah, and when you say, you know, no one recorded a Skyhook song, what about Iron Maiden, who covered Women in Uniform way back in the day?
Yeah, and I thought they did a real shit-ass version of that. I mean, they could have done a decent version, but the thing is, that band, it was just like, they were sort of guitar heavy. It was like they had three Bob Spencers in the band, you know, and I just didn't. Well, just personally, I just thought, oh, they could have done something a lot better with that. But anyhow, bless their hearts, and I guess Greg McCain would be blessing their hearts because they probably sold it. The one, who was it? Mellencamp. He covered "You Just Like Me Because I'm Good in Bed." I only just heard that just recently, and I thought, oh yeah, that was pretty cool.
I did not know that. There's something I better go and look out for.
We did "You Just Like Me Because I'm Good in Bed," and they had the riff. You know,
yeah, you talk about Greg McCanish as being able to write about anything, but Greg McCanish isn't the only person in Skyhooks who could write about anything. You, Bob Bongo Starkie, did the 4 and 20 pie ad. You did the Vaseline ad. You did the Allen's Lollies ad. There's a bit of a creative streak in you too.
Oh, very prolific. Yeah. Oh, look, it was, you know, I guess the thing about that was that sort of came at, you know, at the end of Skyhooks, and I was sort of left there with my dick in my hand, really. I'm like, well, fuck, what am I going to do here now, you know? And it just happened, I just lived around the corner from, you know, from the advertising industry, that big, you know, St Kilda Road. And, so I actually I did rather well in the jingle scene, and that sort of it was sort of I just put everything that I learnt, you know, with putting stuff together with Skyhooks into those little 30-second, you know, jingles, and I was quite successful. I remember that I got the 4 and 20 pie jingle, right, and so. That's you know, in the jingle scene. That's what you call a big one. You know, I can remember being at the MCG, and that's sort of I heard the jingle coming through the system in the MCG, and I thought, oh wow, how funny is that? But then I guess during one of the Reformation tours, Red sort of fessed up. He said, these advertising guys came to. He said, you did the 4 and 20 pies jingle, did you? And he said, yeah, I did. And they said, oh, well, can you do this for me? So he ended up getting work off the back of my jingle.
All of those products still exist. You could go out to each one of those brands and get sponsorship for these upcoming shows and then do those 30-second jingles in between the songs.
I've actually got them on a tape somewhere, but the tape's all shedding, so it's sort of like I can't find a machine to sort of play the stuff on it. But I did have a bit of history.
Yeah.
I did a few sort of film soundtracks and stuff as well. So I had my own little studio, and which I started. I actually did the 4 and 20 pies out on a 4-track machine, believe it or not. I ended up getting an 8-track machine, and then started to, I was there when they started. I used to sort of hire a Fairlight. When they first came out, you'd hire the Fairlight for a day and sort of, fuck around and get some digital sounds on it. Of course, now everyone can do, what you could do on a Fairlight on their phone now. But back then it was everything was sort of entering, it was like this like sequences came in, I had a sequencer, and then, like, of course, the synthesizers, the Prophet 5, I ended up getting one of them, and it was sort of, it was a real sort of, it was a great time, well, for me anyway. It's like in terms of working in the studio or whatever, which I really enjoyed, but I got really lonely. It was sort of like the thing about the music business is you play in a band, you make a record, and then, sometime years later, a few pennies would start trickling in, after everyone's sort of taken a piece of the action, But with the advertising industry, they go in there, they pay you to do the demo, right? So you're in front already, and then if you get the jingle, you do the jingle. Takes you a day, and they give you a check. It was just like, hey, how good's this? So that was, and look, out of that, I did quite well, and I ended up, but I did get lonely. It was just like I'd be working this little studio, day and night, and but on my own, and it just sort of, I really missed that. I kind of miss playing in a band and the live thing, and so that's why I ended up buying the club, the Jump Club.
Jump Club in Collingwood.
In Smith. I had that club for close on 5 years, and pretty much the whole time I still had a studio down in South Melbourne, and I just ended up never going there. I thought the club was going to be, I'll just do this 2 or 3 days a week, but as it turned out, it sort of I ran the place on my own, and it was sort of like it ended up. It sort of ended up being, a bit of hard work. I had to book the bands, I had to promote the bands, had to do the posters, had to order all the fucking grog, had to staff the place up. It ended up being quite a big job, and of course, in the end, it nearly killed me because, of course, you start drinking and the doorman ends up being a dealer, and of course you've got everyone's pouring into the club, looking for a good time, and of course the 80s was just a great time for like cocaine and all that sort of stuff. It was, and it was just a fun time, but in the end it nearly killed me because it was sort of like. Up until I bought that club, I hardly drank at all. I might try, have a few drinks on a Friday night or whatever and go over the top a bit. But apart from that, I wouldn't have had half a dozen beers in a week.
So let me get this right. The doorman's a dealer. You're drinking too much. The club's becoming a burden. You want to get rid of all of that. So you go to Brazil and befriend Ronald Biggs.
Well, I guess that's a bit of a précis. But as it turned out, here's what happened. I literally flew out the day after I settled on that club. I flew out to Rio, and it was and that was sort of my deadline. I always like to work to a deadline, and that was one of my major deadlines. It was like, I want to go to the carnival in Rio, and I'm going to sell this sucker at the club, and that's going to be it. And it sort of drove up, and my solicitor and the solicitor for the buyer, they were just fucking us around, and I ended up, it got to a day before, I was due to fly out. I was due to fly out like at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I said, well, listen, guys, this is the end. If I do not have a check in my hand by 2 o'clock, the deal's off, mate, and I'm going to kick the living shit out of you, right? And so it was one of those things that got really tense. And of course, some people know that I can be quite a hothead. These guys, they sensed that, and they just knew they were fucked. And anyhow, what ended up happening is they got me the check, and then I was on the plane that next morning, and it was just like, wow, it was just like, phew.
So how'd you meet Ronnie?
I met an English artist at the carnival in Rio, actually, and he and his wife are sitting like in front of me, and we ended up, like buying each other drinks or whatever and enjoying the carnival together. And then when the carnival finished, like it went on for 2 or 3 days, it was they were hanging around the town, so we sort of hung out a bit together. And then his wife flew back to London. I went down to Rio. He went off to somewhere else. And when he came back into Rio, he was about to go home. And anyhow, we met up one day, and he had this book, and it was a book. It was like a book on all the great train robbers, and it had been signed by all the other robbers, right? And so he needed to get Ronnie Biggs' signature on this book, So his travel agent had lined him up to go and meet Ronnie. So I said, "Oh wow, I'd love to meet the guy, why don't you just say, I come from Melbourne, and because Ronnie used to live in Melbourne and what have you." And so we went up there, and they called me at the hotel, and Ronnie said, "Yeah, love to meet you, come up." So I went up there and met Ronnie, and we kind of hit it off and really got on well. And then Andrew had left town, and so I was still hanging around down in Copacabana, and Ronnie, whenever he came down to town, we'd sort of go out to lunch or do whatever, he loved to, as he would say, tie a nose bag on, right? So that was sort of became a little bit of a routine. And then I decided to, I wanted to go on one of these, they have these tropical boat tours down in this archipelago, which is about an hour and a half south of Rio. And there was a lady there who I think she was Puerto Rican or something, because she had a house on the other side of the island that she was going to sell. To get to that house, you had to walk around the island. Mm. And so Ronnie, he knew a lot of people in Rio. And then there was a solicitor who was there who had a little speedboat. And so Ronnie organised him and said, "Oh, can you drive this lady around, instead of her walking, just spin her around the speedboat and, let her get her papers and what have you." And so Ronnie and I end up in this speedboat with this lady. So we get on this boat and we go around the island. And as we came around the island, there's this beautiful Portuguese fishing village. We get out there, and I'm sort of going, "Wow, this is just something else." And her house was sort of up behind the village. It was sort of this little house, sort of up the top. You have to go up this track, and so we go up to this house, and she's in there foraging around looking for her papers and what have you, and I'm just taking in this view and thinking, wow, this is just paradise. I said, "Ron, that place is just beautiful, Do you want to go halves?" And he said, "You're on," right? Just like that. And he calls out, I can't remember her name, I think she might have been Claudia or something. And she goes, "Claudia, we'll buy it. Come to town on Tuesday." you know, it's like, so it was just like that. And so Ronnie Biggs and I bought a house on this beautiful island south of Rio. You know, it was just like, it just happened like that. And that was just a bit of a life changer, you know. And that's my how I met Ronnie Biggs story.
How many times did you go back? How many times did you go back and spend with him then?
You know, like over 2 years, I was sort of back and forth all the time. And but yeah, and we spent all this time, you know, doing the place up. So he could only go down there for like 3 days. You know, we do a 3-day switch. Originally we had like we just go down, you know, on a bus and get on a boat. You know, we sort of have to hire a guy to sort of putt us out there. Took an hour or something to get out to the island. And yeah, so we'd be there. You know, they had a little sort of bar. One of the villagers had this sort of little social thing happening, and also we could sort of get fed there as well, you know, like of an evening, and so we were doing the place up, and so he really fancied himself as you know, as a foreman, really, you know, he was foreman, so it was sort of like. He'd say if we're painting, he'd go, now, Bob, this is how you do this. And he'd take the brush and he'd dip it into the tin, and then he would tap it on the side of the tin, right? And then do his, you know, brush strokes, right? It's like he always had to show me how to do things, you know, because he was like the foreman. So anyhow, we ended up painting this beautiful place. I wired it all up for gas lighting, and there was a spring that fed the property. So we had hot water, we had a gas stove. It was just fantastic. And as time went on, we put in like marble floors, and he changed the windows like into these nautical sort of round windows, you know. So the place really started to look quite smart by the time we sort of finished it. But as time went on, I had to sort of spend more time in Australia because I had to, you know, I had my daughter. She was sort of she was sort of growing up a little bit, and I had to stay home and look after her. I ended up having her living with me full time. And so it was like, you know, I had to sort of shelve the Brazil experience a bit, and as when we were on the island, that's where, you know, we'd be there at night. You know, we'd be playing cribbage or whatever, and he'd be telling me all the stories, and it was just fascinating stuff. And thing about Ronnie is he's really well spoken. You know, like he could quote Shakespeare ad nauseum. You know, it was just like he had a real love of language, and he was very fluent in Portuguese. He loved the Portuguese language. He'd say, "Bob, this is how you ask for a beer." You know, it'd be like "Ipon viro gelado stupidamente." You know, look, means, can you give me a stupidly cold beer, right? This little sort of phrases, you know, like he'd come up and say, "Oh wow, listen, this is what they're saying here," you know, and yeah, he just loved, you know, the Portuguese language. He loved the Brazilian people, and they loved him. You know, it was just one of these amazing sort of things. But anyhow, we're down there. He's telling me all the stories, and he was telling me about Paul Cashmere, who was the guy that busted him out of jail. And it was like, I'm going, wow, you know, because prior to him being busted out of jail, he was just a bit part player, you know, of that whole, you know, robbery thing. He was one of the T-boys, you know, and it was like, you know, no one knew his name really. But when he busted out of Wandsworth prison, boom, Ronnie Biggs was up there, in lights. He was like, he was number one on Interpol's most wanted list. It was like everyone was after Ronnie Biggs, and so and he just told me how they got out of jail, and how he got away, and how he went to Paris, and and then ended up like in Sydney, and then meeting up with Charmaine in Darwin. It was just an amazing story. And so his 60th birthday was coming up, and I'm listening to all these stories, and I just thought, wow, I said, Ronnie, what say I fly Paul Seaborn out, from England, because they hadn't even spoken since they went over the wall. And Paul Seaborn had actually done 4.5 years for busting him out of jail. I mean, how many mates would you have that would do that for you, right? Spend 4.5 in jail to bust you out of jail. I mean, God, it's amazing. But so I said, I'll fly Paul out and I'll film your reunion, right? And, we can just make a little documentary about it, And so he said, you're on. Great, and so then it was just like, planning this party, which was just phenomenal. We had it at his house, and of course, I flew Nino Martinetti, he was a cinematographer from Australia. He shot all Paul Cox's films, and I sort of knew him through the advertising industry and what have you. We used to go fishing together and whatever. And so anyhow, we flew him in, and he was like over the moon, kept coming to meet Ronnie Biggs, and and we all shot it all on 16 mil. We had to hire a camera over there and what have you. It was just a whole fun episode, and that's where it all kind of began. And the only way I could get Paul Seaborn into Rio on this particular date was flying him business class via Miami. And so anyhow, when he arrives, he arrives at like 7:30 in the morning, Rio Airport, right? And we've got Nino's there, and we've got a sound guy there, and so we're just going to shoot, the reunion from the very first minute, And we're sitting there waiting for people to come out, and people were coming out, and then Paul says, "There he is." Ron said, there he is, and he's gone, Paul. And then there's this little guy, I'm looking, I mean, he was just like 2 inches above being a midget, and it was like, I'm going, that's the guy that, busts you out of jail. I couldn't believe it. And anyhow, this guy lets rip this big smile, and he's got the tooth missing, and it was like, so cinematic, And I'm thinking, this is just amazing. And then, of course, they're hugging each other, and then the camera sort of follows him. And by this stage, they'd set up this portable bar, right, out there in the foyer. And so these guys have just gone straight around, and there they are, drinking Chivas Regal at this bar at 7:30 in the morning. And that just set the whole scene. Paul wasn't sober, for a minute after that. For the next week, it was just like these guys were pissed the whole time. And anyhow, I ended up shooting all this fantastic footage of the two of them talking about, the time in England and their time in jail and how they actually did, busted it out. It was just an amazing experience for me. I ended up, going through the process of making this documentary, and of course, as they talk about the stories, I'd follow everything up, and I ended up going back into England, and I met up with Jack Slipper, the guy who he was the guy who from Scotland Yard, who was responsible to come and get him in Rio, but they didn't actually get him, so he left without his man. And then I interviewed Malcolm McLaren, because Ronnie Biggs when the Sex Pistols broke up, they went down to Rio, and Ronnie Biggs wrote a song, "No One Is Innocent," and it was on the B side of "My Way," which sold like 7 million copies. And the Ronnie Biggs side of that story was, it was like they said, if this becomes a hit, you'll get a car, you'll get an house, you'll get money in the bank. And he goes, I've got $1,000. It was like, that was the story. So anyhow, I went to England, followed up, and I interviewed Malcolm McLaren, And so anyhow, I've chased Malcolm McLaren all around London, trying to get hold of him, and managed to get him at, come and have this record company. And he said, oh, fair enough, and so he gave me this fantastic interview. And I asked him, in a 20-minute interview, I asked him 3 questions, I think. And it was just like, I'd ask a question and then, he'd just go into this rave, with his red hair and, it was just amazing. And in the end, I said, look, but shouldn't he have been paid his royalties? I mean, it doesn't matter if he's in jail, people still are paid their royalties. He said, he's gone straight to the camera, he's gone, Ronnie, what can I do? They're all gangsters here. You'll have to come back. It was just like cinematic.
Well, this interview certainly went in a direction I wasn't expecting it to go in.
Yeah, okay, well, let's focus. Let's get this 50th thing happening.
Well, I think we've got the Skyhooks story down, we've got the Ego story down, we've got the 4 shows to talk about, Yarraville, Castlemaine, Archie's Creek, Healesville, all in October, and we can put links down here for you.
And I want the band. I want to talk about my band.
Let's go another 30 minutes, Bob. Who's in the band?
Well, I've got this amazing young singer by the name of Sasha, and she's just this little pocket rocket. And as you know, I've been doing this Skyhook show for some time now. It's like I've been doing it for nearly 10 years, and it came about because of Laura Davidson, and she was just this amazing front girl, and she could sing the hell out of the Skyhook stuff, and that's why we did the show, was because I came across her, and originally, she would sort of be a part of my rock and roll band. It would be like 50s, 60s, and hooks. Right, and then in the end, everyone was just asking for the hooks. So I split that band. So I just had my rock and roll band, which was the Purple Gang, and then the Skyhook Show. And over those years, the Skyhook Show has just built. And then so we built it up, and then Laura left, and I was, I just wasn't looking good. I mean, you just can't do a Skyhook Show unless it's right, And I just couldn't find another singer. I sort of was checking out all these cover band girls, and there was just nothing right about it at all. So I decided to give it up. I said I just wasn't going to do it. And I had these bookings in Adelaide, and so I called up the guy, the agent. I said, look, got to pull the pin on this, mate. I can't find a singer, and so that's it. And he said, oh, well, what's the problem? And I said, I can't find a singer. And he said, well, look, there's this band over here. There's this girl. She sings Living the 70s in her band. I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah, I've actually got a video of it, And so he sent that over, and I looked and I thought, heard her singing Live in the 70s. I thought, no, sort of it didn't really set me on fire. But then she sang these 5 other songs, and by the end of it, I'm going, oh, wow. She had this amazing range, and she had this really lovely stage presence and an energy. And I thought, you know what? This would be amazing. It could work. But the thing is, she's only 21. And I'm thinking, how does that work, So anyhow, I said, oh, well, just ask her if she's interested. And anyhow, the message was, oh, she'd be honoured. And I'm thinking, oh, wow. So I flew over to Adelaide, and we got together in a little sort of in a little rehearsal room, and we played like about 3 songs. She just sang along really to the record, and I played along. And after 3 songs, I'm going, oh yeah, because she had the sound, and I knew that she had the stage presence, which is very important for a Skyhook show, because the whole Skyhooks thing was Shirl. He was the key. He was the connection to the audience, and we just played all the the songs. And so yeah, and anyhow, so we started doing that last year, and then of course it was building, and it was fantastic. And I've never been so happy on stage. She's just wonderful, and she learnt the stuff, and she's got the range, and yeah, it's just a lot of fun performing with her. And of course, that all came crashing down, like in January when I got diagnosed with leukemia. And of course, I got slammed straight in the hospital, and I had to cancel all these gigs. And so now we're just coming out again, and we got our first gig this week. So again, we're starting again, and so we've got this gig at the Basement this week, and then we've got the 50th anniversary show. So we're going to do the 50th anniversary shows. I'm going to play the entire, Ego's Not a Dirty Word album in its entirety, and then the second set will just be all the rest of the hits and whatever the stuff we want to play. So it's going to be a real challenge, and we're really looking forward to it. But got to tell you, Paul, wait until you see Sasha. She's just amazing, and she's just reignited, my desire to keep playing, really, and it's so much fun. So we've now got a really great band, and I've got Michael Cristiano, my right-hand man, on guitar, and so we've got everything now. We've got the sound, we've got a really nice band, and we've got this electric singer, so we just got it right, and so when people come to see a Skyhook show, it's just like, it's got wow factor, and mainly because of little Sacha, she's just amazing, she's got this amazing energy.
And a lot to do with you, of course. Well, it's been great to see you. It really has been great to see you and catch up, and these stories are just gold. I
know, it's a different look, isn't it, this?
But you just put the big frill neck lizard on, and you'll be right back in 1975 again.
Yeah, with the 21-year-old singer. It's like I was 21.
just like you did in 1975. Yeah. Bob, thanks for joining us here at Noise 11.
Nice.